Imagine for a moment that somewhere in the middle of Texas there was a large foreign military base, say Chinese or Russian. Imagine that thousands of armed foreign troops were constantly patrolling American streets in military vehicles. Imagine they were here under the auspices of keeping us safe, or promoting democracy, or protecting their strategic interests. Imagine that they operated outside of U.S. law and that the Constitution did not apply to them. Imagine that every now and then they made mistakes or acted on bad information and accidentally killed or terrorized innocent Americans, including women and children, most of the time with little or no repercussions or consequences. Imagine that they set up checkpoints on our soil and routinely searched and ransacked entire neighborhoods of homes. Imagine if Americans were fearful of these foreign troops and overwhelmingly thought America would be better off without their presence. Imagine if some Americans were so angry about them being in Texas that they actually joined together to fight them off in defense of our soil and sovereignty because leadership in government refused or were unable to do so. Imagine that those Americans were labeled terrorists or insurgents for their defensive actions and routinely killed or captured or tortured by the foreign troops on our land. Imagine that the occupiers' attitude was that if they just killed enough Americans, the resistance would stop. But instead, for every American killed, 10 more would take up arms against them, resulting in perpetual bloodshed. Imagine if most of the citizens of the foreign land also wanted these troops to return home. Imagine if they elected a leader who promised to bring them home and put an end to this horror. Imagine if that leader changed his mind once he took office. The reality is that our military presence on foreign soil is as offensive to the people that live there as armed Chinese troops would be if they were stationed in Texas. Shutting down military bases
and ceasing to deal with other nations with threats and violence is not isolationism. It is the opposite. Opening ourselves up to friendship, honest trade, and diplomacy is the foreign policy of peace and prosperity. It is the only foreign policy that will not bankrupt us in the short order, as our current actions most definitely will. I share the disappointment of the American people in the foreign policy rhetoric coming from the administration. The sad thing is, our foreign policy will change eventually, as Rome's did, when all budgetary and monetary tricks to fund it are exhausted.
Buckle your seatbelt. It's time for another episode of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com. While you're at PrepperRecon.com, stop by the Prepper Recon supply store. We've got a great selection of Molly compression packs, hydration kits, and our new concealed carry tactical slings. All the packs and slings come with your choice of patch to let liberals know how you feel. We have some very cool Moulin Labe patches, Come and Take It patches, Sheepdog, Zombie Response Team, and matching U.S. flag patches. Of course, we still have our fully stocked Molly-compatible individual first aid kits as well. Just click the Store tab at the top of the PrepperRecon.com homepage. Today's guest is Mike Slack. Mike is hosting the upcoming Preppers and Patriots Expo in Springfield, Missouri. Mike, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be here.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, when did you first wake up to the need to prepare?
Well, my whole life, I guess, was leading up to it. I'm a reader, and I read a lot of dystopian science fiction novels. Saw films like The Omega Man with Charlton Heston, and read the book it was based on, I Am Legend. Stephen King's The Stand, which is kind of the end of the world. It's just the beginning of the terror there. You know, always On the Beach by Neville Brand, I guess it was. I always liked books like that, movies like that. But when it just really hit home was 2007. I was living in Springfield at the time. We had an ice storm. Our utility company hadn't trimmed trees in 20 years. So we had 2 weeks without electric power. And had to go to my stepdaughter's house because she had gas heat. But we had no electricity anywhere. And I went through that ice storm, went out and got prepared. I hit some pawn shops, and the people who had generators they'd purchased for the storm A lot of them took them to the pawn shop and sold them, thought they'd never need them again. So I got 3 of them at a good price, started collecting other items, and my wife was very into homesteading, and we had planned on moving where we are now, about a 2-hour drive south of Springfield in the Ozark Mountains, middle of nowhere. And got down here, lo and behold, another ice storm hit us. 2 weeks without power again, but this time it didn't matter. We had kerosene lanterns and lamps, a wood stove for heat and to cook on, generators to get a little electricity running, keep the freezers going. Just a couple hours a day was enough. We had plenty of food stored away, plenty of water, had shelters for the livestock, and we were fine. And my wife is she passed away last year, but she was a retired teacher. For about 3 years there, she was teaching homesteading classes, heritage studies, she called them. Things like organic gardening, raised bed gardening, canning, dehydrating. We'd have friends come in and talk about soap making or beekeeping, things that we didn't know about, and then we learned. And we saw the need for teaching disaster preparedness and started to sponsor day-long seminars with guests coming in to speak on different aspects of being prepared. And kind of fell in with a group of people and started to promote a festival here in the spring called the Go Green Self-Reliance Festival. Got to where we're having about 3,000 people come to the city park to hear speakers and listen to music and talk to vendors. And, you know, I always said a carnival atmosphere was fine. A corn dog isn't going to kill you. And while you're there, you might learn something. And several of the vendors who came to the festivals suggested doing an expo in Springfield, our largest metro area, because there had not been one there for several years. And Springfield has about a 250,000 population. It's third largest city here besides Kansas City and St. Louis. And a lot of really nice hotels. One of them, the Doubletree Hotel, had remodeled recently. They had a huge ballroom that would hold 60 to 70 vendor tables, a theater for speakers. And I'd gotten to know an awful lot of people in the prepper, survivalist, homesteader world, whatever we're going to call self-reliance. And most of them were willing to come and be speakers. So, you know, I'm tickled to death with the lineup we've got and the response. You know, I've had calls today from Kentucky, Tennessee, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Iowa. People who are driving anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to come to the expo.
Oh, that's fantastic. So the Go Green Festival was the jumping off point for Preppers and Patriots Expo?
I'd say so. We did 6 of those, and it's totally nonprofit, totally free. We just took up donations to try to cover the expenses. And, you know, just always had good attendance. And that's in a little town of 2,000. 3,000 people showing up with a 2,000 population to me wasn't bad. And my hope was that if we were in the larger metro area, we could have several thousand people show up. And I worked in advertising in that market for a while and knew folks at some of the radio stations and kind of knew what would work to reach folks. So we're a month out, and I'm already getting a lot of interest and haven't really even started the local advertising yet. So, you know, I'm happy. If I could go through a real short list of a few of the speakers that'll be there, that a lot of them are probably familiar to your listeners.
Oh, I'd love to hear who's going to be speaking, and you can go ahead and maybe just give us the topic that they'll be speaking on as well, if you'd like.
Sure. By the way, the website, if anyone wants to go to it, is preppersandpatriots.net. And my phone number is on the website. And if folks use Facebook, it's Preppers and Patriots Expo on Facebook. And on Facebook, it's an ampersand, an and sign, whereas that and is spelled out on the website. Preppersandpatriots.net or Preppers and Patriots Expo on Facebook. And let's see. I guess the first thing is to mention here is we are really blessed in this part of the country to have several heirloom seed companies. The largest, I believe, heirloom seed company in the world is Baker Creek, which is just outside of Springfield in the town of Mansfield. And Mansfield, it's probably because Laura Ingalls Wilder was from there, and they have a little house on the Prairie Museum there dedicated to her. But probably more folks these days know about Baker Creek Seeds. And we also have close to there in Hartville, White Harvest Seed Company. And then down in Yellville, Arkansas, not far from us, we have the Down to Earth Seed Company. Now, Mike Knox, who runs White Harvest with his family, will be speaking, and Scott Peterson from Down to Earth Seeds will be speaking. I've heard Mike's talk before, and he's really educational. He tells people exactly what a hybrid is, what an heirloom is, and what GMO means, and why you really should avoid GMOs, and you're a lot better off with heirloom seeds for your gardening needs. And I know that Scott Peterson shares his views there. I use heirloom seeds in my own garden, and I've had some really fantastic tomatoes and cucumbers there this week. Now, let's see. Bob Gaskin has the Black Dog School of Survival. Bob teaches tactical pistol shooting, prepping 101. Basically, he's almost a Renaissance man of self-reliance. He will be one of our speakers on 2 different occasions, Saturday and Sunday. One of his talks will be on taking care of your pets during a disaster. A lot of dogs and cats were abandoned during Hurricane Katrina. Bob doesn't want to see that happen again, and he'll tell people how to take care of their pets during an emergency. Oh, and then as far as alternative energy, which is always a popular topic, we have some local companies that are in the solar power business, and a lot of them encourage do-it-yourself solar. They sell the parts. They'll show you how to do it. Others will go in and get a house totally off the grid. And then I have a fellow named Mike Brown. I don't know if you've had him on as a guest before, but he is a good one. He's an inventor. He's come up with a carburetor that you can put on an older carburetor vehicle and extend the gas mileage. He says a 10-mile-per-gallon pickup truck can get 50 miles per gallon with this carburetor. But his main topic will be steam engines. Mike has a small manufacturing company and makes small steam engines that burn firewood, just like the engines that used to be on the riverboats on the Mississippi in Mark Twain's time. And these small steam engines can go on a boat if you'd like. You can use it to get around on the rivers and lakes. But what he recommends you do with them is have one at your home to use as either the primary source of electricity or as a backup, or as a supplement if you happen to have solar power. That's another way, if the sun is not shining that day, to get power generated and to the batteries. He's basically taking an old technology and modernized it. And another older technology that's been modernized is wood gas. Are you familiar with wood gas? Or heard about the pickup trucks that burn firewood?
Yes, I saw it on. I saw it actually on. I guess it was the first episode of Doomsday Preppers, where David Kobler and his former associate had built one, and then there was another Discovery Channel show called The Colony, and they actually built one.
I saw that too. Yeah. Well, there's a college professor in Alabama who's been up to Go Green with his pickup a few times. And that's always popular. His first pickup he sold to a man in Springfield named Doug Brethauer, who's very well known for his work with biochar. And the pickup, of course, is too large to take in the hotel. But Doug will have it in the parking lot, and he will be speaking on making energy with wood gas. And we have a Missouri State University professor there, Dr. Hart, who will have a small generator where you can use wood gas once again to create electricity for your home and to heat your home at the same time. And because you're burning the fumes that come off of the first layer of wood that burns, when it's working properly, it has no emissions. It becomes safe to burn inside a home. And, to me, that's just amazing. Now, one of the things that folks think about and worry about, rightly so, if the stuff should hit the fan sometime, is what to do when there's no doctor around and you have a medical emergency or someone's sick. And we have a couple of folks covering that angle. Don McPherson, who is a former Air Force medic and has worked in emergency rooms and on ambulances as an EMT, she also has studied holistic medicine and will be speaking on making medicines yourself from things you have in your kitchen. You can get at the health food store, that you can even find growing in your yard. And as an example, a few weeks ago when I needed a mild antibiotic, I went to see Dawn and got a jar of a concoction she made using garlic, cayenne pepper, raw honey, all of those are natural antibiotics, a little colloidal silver in there.
And did you take that, was that oral? You took that orally, or was a topical thing?
No, this was for internal use.
Okay.
Stirred it up, used a spoon, had 2 or 3 spoonfuls at a time. And it worked, it cleared it up.
And then how long did you have to take that?
Oh, until it was gone, it took about 5 days.
I guess as far as the American healthcare system is concerned, the stuff's already hit the fan, hasn't it? I mean, with Obamacare.
Yeah.
So it's great to have that type of information to be able to do things like that for yourself.
It is, and a lot of people don't realize that raw honey is a natural antibiotic, garlic is a natural antibiotic, and colloidal silver is easy to get. In fact, we have a vendor coming who sells a machine to make your own colloidal silver, or you can simply buy a few bottles of it from him to store and keep around when you need it. Now, and we have a doctor, Dr. Jim Caesar, who lives in Branson, Missouri, who is concerned about people treating broken bones or protracted fractures or gashes if there is no doctor. So he and his wife, who is a registered nurse, give a presentation on suturing. And then he sells a small kit at a very, very reasonable price, everything you need to suture a wound, along with, I think he's going to have an instruction DVD in there with it by the time the expo comes. And he includes a prescription for lidocaine. You know, otherwise, the person getting sutured is going to have to bite on a belt and be in intense pain. The lidocaine is topical. It will deaden the area while you're suturing it up. And I think that's one of the most valuable things a person could possibly have. That could literally save a life someday. So I'm very much looking forward to having him. Actually, Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy are pretty well known in the prepper community. Mm-hmm. And they do a similar topic. I talked to them, and they were already booked at this expo, but they did say, next year if we do it, they'll make it. And since they're not there, I felt like we were fortunate to find Dr. Caesar. And, let me see, just checking my list here. I have several people are going to be offering essential oils and herbs and talking about those. And I don't know enough about essential oils myself, so I'm anxious to learn everything I can. And I have some folks with long-term storage foods. In fact, I think all the major brands are represented by someone. Thrive Foods, Mountain House, let's see, Numana Foods called the other day and went ahead and booked their table. Noah's Pantry is popular. In fact, they're based in the Ozarks. So I'm anxious for people to have a good supply of long-term storage foods as well as the heirloom seeds so they can grow their garden and keep going when the food runs out.
And the non-GMO seeds, the heirloom seeds, that all kind of goes right in there along with the health, because if you're eating good, then you're going to be much more resistant to infections or
have your immune system strong, fight stuff off. Yeah. And we have another speaker, Lynette Pate, who is an organic guru. Lynette wrote a book called Fuel for the Body, and then she went on a coast-to-coast bicycle tour to promote her book, Organic Foods, and to raise awareness of GMOs. And she will be there speaking, and she'll have her book available, and we'll autograph it. And Lynette also puts on an organic festival every year. Some folks may have heard her on some radio programs. She's a dynamic person who knows a lot about health, and she also cares a great deal about erosion of some of our rights, and has been an activist for liberty. And, if anybody's a fan of Daniel Boone or of the, what in the world do they call that TV show. I haven't even seen it. The guys with the long beards.
Duck Dynasty?
Duck Dynasty, yeah. Well, we've got a guy named Dave Lohr, and every time he's out there in his Mountain Man outfit, kids see him and think he's with Duck Dynasty. But Dave is a retired aircraft maintenance mechanic and has worked on jet engines. But when he retired, he went to his first love of being a mountain man. And he does a talk on surviving in the wilderness if you have absolutely nothing. What foods, plants are good to eat, which ones are deadly and should be avoided. How to capture squirrels or rabbits using a snare trap. How to make a bow and arrow so that you can actually hunt and survive in the wild. He makes bows and sells them in the Native American fashion. He also makes a thing called the atlatl. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not, but the atlatl predates the bow and arrow by several thousand years. It's a throwing stick for throwing small spears. And I first discovered it on a Star Trek episode years ago when Kirk and Spock were on a planet without weapons, and Spock made an atlatl for Captain Kirk to use. And didn't hear anything else about them for years. And then suddenly discovered that Dave made these, and that they're legal to use to hunt deer in Missouri. And some people do. So if you need to make your own weapon, either to hunt with or defend yourself, that's a possibility, and everything you need for it's out in the woods. And so he'll be there demonstrating those. And quite anxious to see that as well. And a fellow named Bob Anderson will be there too, who is an author of a series of books called The Survivalist. The character in his books, John Thomas O'Rourke, has been popular among a lot of readers since the 1980s. And the first time I ever saw the word survivalist in print, it was on one of these books. And I've really been surprised at how many fans the books have out there among preppers. There are probably 40 books in the series now. And Bob is a retired Air Force security policeman. He got up to E9 when he retired, which is as high as a guy can go as an enlisted man. Knows a great deal about homesteading, preparedness, survivalism, and it shows in the books, which are all good reads, good adventures. And he said anyone who wants to bring copies of the books with them, he'll autograph them. He'll have some new books out there for people to buy if they'd like. And I'm anxious to see him again, too. But, you know, it's preppers and patriots in our name. And on the patriot side, we have several different groups represented that I'm anxious to talk to. The Constitution Party of Missouri will be there, and the Libertarian Party. And I read a novel recently about an economic collapse and civil war, and at the end of the book, when they reorganized the government, they still had a two-party system, but they had, instead of Republicans and Democrats, they had the Constitutionalists and the Libertarians. And I thought that was an improvement over our current system.
Anything would be an improvement over our current system, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And both of these groups are full of patriotic people who read the Constitution, interpret it probably a little closer to the way you and I would. And they'll be there to let people know exactly what they do, show them how they can get involved. A lot of folks don't even know they have a choice, a third party, as it were, or a third and a fourth party. Now, we also have a group called Missourians Against Agenda 21. And you're probably very familiar with Agenda 21. When I first heard about it, I thought it was a crazy conspiracy theory. And it is a crazy conspiracy theory, but it turns out it's also real.
It's just a true crazy conspiracy theory.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a lot of them are starting to turn out to be like that. You know, 10 years ago when Alex Jones was ranting about this police state where cops were going to kick in the doors and confiscate people's guns, well, that happened after Katrina. And where they were going to do these house-to-house warrantless searches and lock down entire neighborhoods, you know, well, that happened after the Boston bombing. So all of these crazy conspiracy theories are they're starting to be shown to be true. So
Exactly.
They're still crazy. It's just that now they're crazy and true.
Was it a couple of weeks ago there was a police raid on the wrong house, or looking for some drug guy who wasn't even in the house. They threw a flashbang grenade in that landed in the crib.
And it burned the baby?
Mm-hmm. Crazy stuff. And, a lot of my friends in this area are retired policemen. And every last one of them is worried about the militarization of the police. And I mentioned one of them to you earlier, carries his Constitution in his pocket. And, I know there's still a lot of good cops out there, but we got some we need to keep an eye on, especially in some of the larger cities. So we will have these groups there, Missourians Against Agenda 21 and the Constitutionalists and the Libertarians. There is a group there that is going to talk to people about the Article 5 Convention of States. And that is kind of a controversy among the liberty movement. Some folks really for it, some really against it. And my belief is we just need to get more information out about it and let people talk about it and make up their own minds over whether or not it would be a good idea. Personally, I'd want to see an awful lot of safeguards, make sure we did not have a runaway convention. The folks involved in that tell me that they have the safeguards built in. So I guess the thing is take a look at it and see if they're right. And they'll be there. We have the Property Rights Coalition, and that is a group with 6 chapters in Missouri that, along with several other groups, actually beat the federal government last year. The Department of the Interior was trying to take over water rights in about half of Missouri and about half of Arkansas, pretty much the entire Ozarks region. They called it the White River Blue Way Project. And the people rose up, led by some of these grassroots organizations. They raised such a ruckus, the politicians noticed. We had our Congress critters get involved. The lieutenant governor became very involved. And then our county governments, 20 of 21 affected counties in Missouri signed letters rejecting it. And basically, the small guy won. The federal government backed off, canceled the project, and left us alone for a year. Of course, now going through the EPA, they're trying to do the same thing again, so the groups that fought them before are fighting them now. And they'll be there to inform people about what's going on and hopefully help some other folks get involved, help out in trying to maintain constitutional rights and property rights.
And then one of your speakers is going to be speaking on restoring liberty. You think that's an important issue?
It certainly is, yeah. In fact, let me check. Mike Evans, yes, on Restoring Liberty. Mike is a talk show host. He has America's Voice Now, which has become a very popular show in this area because he tells it like it is, kind of like you do, and doesn't care who he offends. And he has definite ideas on preserving our rights, getting our rights back, and restoring liberty. And I always tell Mike I think he might have some Baptist preachers somewhere in his ancestry, because when he starts talking, he goes on and starts to convert people. I think he could have, Jesse Jackson in there with him, or Harry Reid, and by the time he was through talking for an hour, he'd convert him.
Well, let's lock him in the room with the entire upper and lower house of Congress.
I'd like to see that. I really would.
Most of them need converting.
And, you mentioned Obamacare earlier, too. And, of course, our veterans' health care is in the news these days.
Yeah. Is that a precursor to, is the VA, is that what we should expect from Obamacare in 5 years? That's
what I've always felt. And, if you talk to most veterans, they will tell you that there are a lot of folks at the VA that are trying to do the right thing. And there are others who simply could care less.
But the ones that are trying to do the right thing are pinned down by bureaucracy. And it seems like everything that America does, we do it bigger and better than every other country. So if if socialized healthcare is a mess in every other country in the world, wouldn't you expect that we'll do it a bigger and better mess than everybody else?
Oh, we have to. Yeah, that's our job. Bigger and better mess. Well, on that topic, we have Joyce Riley coming to speak. And Joyce has a radio show called The Power Hour. I noticed she's the number 2 person on the Genesis Network after Alex Jones as far as listenership, and has a lot of fans in this area. But I first heard Joyce probably 20 years ago on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell talking about Gulf War syndrome. I had never heard of Gulf War syndrome until she caught on and mentioned it. Now, Joyce was a flight nurse in the Air Force during the first Gulf War. She got sick afterwards, and she had friends and colleagues who were getting sick. And she did the studies. She was the first person I'd ever heard of using the phrase Gulf War syndrome. And she's on the Pentagon's enemies list right now, and the VA's, because she's made it very clear that they have been ignoring veterans' health care for years and years, and that they were deliberately putting people in harm's way. Depleted uranium all over the battlefield has an effect on people. Chemicals that were used have an effect. So Joyce will be speaking. She said there have been some new developments in the VA scandal, and anyone who is a veteran or knows a veteran should listen to her speak. So I strongly recommend her. Oh, another thing to mention, too, is, we always hear a lot about barter and precious metals as a currency rather than the fiat currency we have now. And I simply don't know enough about gold, silver, and other precious metals myself to make a good decision. We do have a lady coming from the Swiss America company, which is a precious metals dealer, to give us an educational talk on that. So if a person wants to invest in gold, silver, or other precious metals, they can get information there about how to go about it, or at least learn enough to be able to know where to look to get more information and start educating themselves. That's probably the best place to start. So anyway, you can see we've got a good lineup, and I'm really excited. A lot of these folks are kind of personal heroes. So.
Oh, it's fantastic. It sounds like you're going to have a really, really educational lineup. Now, in your opinion, what's the biggest threat to our current way of life?
I will offend some folks if I say that, but the 2 current political parties, in my opinion, are the biggest threat because of, inaction and trying to continue with business as normal. Obamacare was passed on purely partisan lines. We've not been able to change it, and the chief executive keeps changing it illegally, violations of the Constitution. We have the Mideast in an uproar. We have our borders porous as a sieve. Everyone feels sorry for children, especially when they go across the entire country of Mexico. But we cannot absorb, thousands and thousands and thousands of illegal aliens. I hate to say migrants or immigrants because they're not legal. And we simply cannot afford it. In addition, I had a client last year. I'm a writer, and I sometimes do resumes for people who are job hunting. And I had a client who had worked with one of the federal agencies who was telling me that South America, especially Venezuela, were full of Iranian agents and Hamas agents. And if they wanted to cause harm here, it was very easy for them to slip across the Mexican border. And again, there's no excuse for that. And the 2 existing political parties are allowing it. Up until the 1940s, part of the job of the U.S. Army was to guard the border with Mexico. And now we think it has to be the civilian border patrol or civil service border patrol doing it. But that's part of the military's job.
Well, we've got the military spread out in bases over 130 other countries, so they're really not available to guard the border. And
no.
And I would think that if
the modern world, I believe we do need some forces overseas, but not as many. When I was in the Army, I was in Germany, but we probably don't need troops in Germany anymore. We don't need nearly as many in Japan or Korea as we used to have. You know, I'm a believer in forward or pre-positioned equipment. Places like Diego Garcia and Guam, but we don't need that many troops overseas anymore. And if we had them back here, the country would be safer. The borders could be secure.
And probably if we didn't have such a big nanny state with all of the entitlements, I guess we wouldn't have quite the immigration problem that we have if people didn't think they were going to get a free lunch when they got here.
Well, you know, in 2009, right in the middle of the Second Great Depression, we had fewer illegal aliens crossing the border because the economy wasn't as good here. And, you know, you're right, if we didn't have press 1 for English every time you called a company's telephone number, accommodating them, and various government programs whenever you got here, and we wouldn't have as many. And I am all for legal immigration. You know, we're all descendants of immigrants. Most of my ancestors came from England, Scotland, Ireland. You know, a few from Germany. That was a long time ago. So, you know, we're all descendants of immigrants, except the Native Americans. But they came here legally. And they assimilated. They became American. I have friends of Hispanic descent, or friends whose ancestors spoke German when they arrived. They tried to become Americans. And within a generation, generally they had. Somehow or another, we've gotten this idea popularized that we're no longer a melting pot, that we're going to be separate cultures within the country. And, you know, I just don't think that's healthy for us.
And I live in South Florida, and going from Miami to Naples, Florida, there is a road. It's called Alligator Alley, and it's about a 100-mile stretch of road, and it goes straight through the Everglades. And they have these big, tall fences up on either side to keep, I guess it's to keep the alligators from getting across in the middle of the road, because there really are alligators all along. You can see them in the canals that are on both sides of the road, going all the way down that 100 stretch. But that's 200, because if you've got a stretch of fence on both sides, that's 200 miles worth of fence. So I would think if they could do it for the alligators, they could certainly do it for the border between America and Mexico.
You would think, yes. And, you know,
it's not the Great Wall of China, you know. It's just a fence.
I don't understand our politicians. And, you know, building that fence would create jobs for a while they built it. A lot of construction workers that are out of work right now and would love to go down there and help build a fence. And it works as far as stopping floods of illegals. Israel had a problem with terrorists coming in from Egypt, Gaza, the West Bank. They built a fence. And they have very few problems with people sneaking. In fact, they're having to dig tunnels to get underneath the fence now. One of the reasons for the problems they're having over there now. Tunnels and rockets. So, I don't know. Kind of nuts, isn't it?
It sure is.
One of the nice things about an expo like this is you get around sane people who understand we could have problems in the future and want to prepare for them, want to share their knowledge with other people so that they will be ready. And they want to talk about some real political solutions for trying to, you know, take the country back, make it more sensible, smaller government the way we were intended to have. And you'll notice on the website for Preppers and Patriots, preppersandpatriots.net, our logo is the yellow Gadsden flag, the rattlesnake that says, "Don't tread on me." And that was one of the original flags used during the Revolutionary War. That's also become you know, a bit of a motto for some folks in the Liberty Movement and for a lot of preppers. And I thought that was appropriate. In fact, I'm hoping the staff members will be able to wear yellow T-shirts with the "Don't Tread on Me" logo on the back. So,
And you said it there. It's worth the price of admission just to go and be around some sane people for a couple of hours, because and it's true. And I went to a great expo here in Florida, and in Lakeland, Florida. It was up in Central Florida, but it was fantastic, and it was just great to be around so many like-minded people. If you don't buy anything, you don't go to one single class, just to go and get a cup of coffee or a soda pop and just be around some like-minded people for a couple hours is just so refreshing. It really is. Now, can you tell us just one more time, when and where is the expo, and how can folks get tickets? And tell us one more time about the website.
Okay, the website is preppersandpatriots.net. If you go to the website, you'll see my phone number. If you have any questions at all, just give me a call. If you're on Facebook, it's Preppers and Patriots Expo on Facebook. Preppers and the ampersand sign for and, Preppers and Patriots Expo. Please go and like the page. I understand it's good to get likes on your page on Facebook. Not sure why, but they tell me it is. And we're at the Doubletree Hotel by Hilton. The room rates there are very reasonable for such a nice hotel. I think around $80 a night. If you wanted to spend less, that's on Motel Row in Springfield. It'd be very easy to find a nice, clean place to stay for $30 or $40. Most places take all kinds of discounts. And 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock both days. $10 admission covers the weekend. We'll stamp hands like we used to do at parties back in college. So you can come Saturday morning, spend the day, go home. Or to your room, come back Sunday morning, spend the day again. And I think that's a good way to spend a weekend, because you could literally spend the entire time sitting in the theater and classes listening to people and walk away with a lot of knowledge. And you can spend hours and hours walking around with the vendors, talking to them. So, I know, I'll mention this too, we do have some folks that are driving quite a ways to come, so they must think it's worthwhile. Des Moines, Iowa has a Preppers meetup group, and I understand a group of those folks are coming down. I had calls this morning from Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Tennessee. I know some of our vendors are coming from Texas and Tennessee. So, don't think because it's not next door that you can't make it. Come on in. Spend the weekend.
And tell us the dates again.
August 16th and 17th.
Very good, very good. Mike, I sure wish I could make it out to the expo. It sounds like there's going to be a ton of great information. Thanks for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you, Mark. Take care.
In American Reset, the final chapter of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, the ultimate contest between liberty and tyranny reaches the apex. The Bear family and their neighbors learn the true value of community as they rely on each other to survive the war and the effects of the financial meltdown. Will the collapse bring an oppressive regime that enslaves the American people, or will the Patriots prevail and guide the country back to a place of freedom, peace, and prosperity? Get your copy of American Reset in Kindle, paperback, or audio edition at Amazon.com today.